imagine if we just did. What was the people I won't be able to laugh.
We're not sick. We're reading spooky stories.
Hello, people of the web. I'm MKRK. We aren't doing ASMR. We are doing spooky stories today. Anyways,
my friend's making a spreadsheet. I don't know. So they're okay. At least mine are okay. Oh, no, I was gonna catch you.
So I felt your finger enter my mouth, and I was like,
"Ew! Don't say that. That's gross." Says the girl that almost. Yeah. Anyway, so we are reading some scary, spooky, creepy stories today because why not? Spooky season is all season if you try hard enough.
If you try hard enough like we do.
Halloween is both of our favorite holidays. So.
Heck yeah. Well, I mean, look, you can see, like, there's so we're in my basement.
I mean, you can't see, but...
We're in my basement, and there's, like, Halloween decorations that are, like, in the, so there's, like, a stairwell that, like, you can put stuff underneath. And there's spooky stuff underneath there.
There's also a Christmas tree and a Santa.
That's my mom's favorite holiday.
Oh, that's why.
I mean, we also just took down our Christmas stuff.
So did we.
Literally. No, there's still stuff upstairs that, like,
we still have a big Santa on our garage.
We still have.
I think they just forgot about it. You do? Mm-hmm. Oh right, I was upstairs and I saw it.
Yeah.
I know. So I have short ones. So would you like me to start with one?
Yeah, because I have two.
Okay. I have, like, little short ones and then a longer one.
Okay. I have, like, a long one, a short-ish one.
Okay.
And then, yeah, that's it.
Alright, so this one's more, like, a little creepy. We're going to change the surroundings, so we're going to clap on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Spooky now? Okay. This one is called The Only Child. She didn't hesitate, dropping her 5-year-old from that bridge into the unforgiving rocks, some 80 feet below. She was perfect. So is her husband. Having an ugly son is unacceptable.
Hephaestus?
Her husband was devastated, while she did a lot of faking. A year passed and she gave birth to another. But this time, it's a beautiful baby girl.
Aphrodite.
He was once again satisfied. And at last, she too. Some 5 years later, she had a walk with her daughter in that familiar bridge. Midway through, her daughter hugged her very tightly. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked. Her daughter replied with a whimper. "I'm scared. So scared. I love you, Mommy. I've always loved you." "Oh, I love you too, sweetheart. But what are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid you'll drop me off this bridge again." Okay, that's it. See, it was more creepy than scary. It was just kind of
in the beginning, I was like, this is just about, like, Zeus and Hephaestus era from,
it was
like,
very like that.
Greek legends.
Greek mythology and whatnot. So, yeah. Sorry to keep looking at my nail. I broke it.
The scariest part of the podcast. Other than how cold it is down here. Jesus Christ.
I'm always cold, but I'm in a sweatshirt today, so.
I am too. Feel how soft. Like, even the outside of this is super soft.
That feels nice.
Isn't it?
I'm just gonna.
That's alright. Hug my arm for comfort, but also because it's soft.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. I'm just gonna change it.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know, I'm not taking it on and off.
Alright, so I found, this is like from creepypastastories.com. And this is called...
Yeah, we don't own any of these.
Yeah, this is called The Whimper Tree, by Micah Edwards. And this is gonna be the long one.
Okay.
By the way, it's gonna be like 9 minutes long. That's
okay.
The estimated time.
That's fine. That's fine.
When I was a kid, I used to love it when my granddad came to visit. He was a big man, tall and stout and loud, with a large bushy beard and a booming laugh. He wore an eye patch over his left eye, and in my mind, he really was a pirate. I'd always show him pictures I'd drawn of him aboard a ship, fighting dragons and sea monsters, and he'd laugh his big laugh and tell me it wasn't like that at all. But he'd wink when he said it, so I never knew for sure. One time I asked him if he'd stolen my dad as a baby, captured him from a sinking ship. "Why would you think that?" he asked me curiously. I gestured at my granddad, who was in the other room reading. Visually, he and my granddad had almost nothing in common. My dad was an average height with slim build. He was clean-shaven, pale, neat, and wiry. In my grandfather's presence, he seemed almost to vanish, eclipsed by my granddad's personality and self. "He's so normal," I told my granddad. "And you're like a pirate bear." My granddad roared with laughter, slapping his knee. "No," he told me. "He's mine, all right, body and blood." "But you're so different." Granddad shrugged. "He liked to read, nothing wrong with that. He was a sharp boy and grew up to be a smart man. A lot smarter than his old man, that's for sure." Didn't you ever wish he was more like you, though? But I wanted to ask if he ever wanted my dad to take over the pirate ship, but I knew that wouldn't get a straight answer if I asked. To tell the truth, I was happy to have him stay inside. I was probably overprotective as a parent, and it made me at ease that knowing he was at home and quiet. I tried to picture my granddad as overprotective and failed. The best I could imagine was him pushing my dad behind him as cannibals attacked the ship. Granddad saw my disbelieving expression. He leaned in close to me and tapped his eye patch. "Did I ever tell you how I lost my eye?" I shook my head. I often asked, but he'd always make up some fantastical story that even I didn't believe. "I was young. Not as young as you. I was in high school. It was summer and I was out in the woods with 3 of my friends. Brian, Jimmy, and Mike."
Nice names.
Yeah, I know, right?
Real or
Very
show?
bland. Give me some spice.
A little bit of spice.
We were out in the woods because our parents wouldn't have us home anymore. They'd kicked us out when the sun rose and we weren't expected back until dark. So all day, every day, we'd roam around. This particular day, we were deep in the woods, catching crawdads in the stream and throwing pine cones at each other. We had vague plans of making a fort, but none of us had brought any sort of tools. So this quickly devolved into finding fallen logs and trying to prop them up against each other. We were having mild success, but most of what we found was soggy and rotten from long contact with the ground. When we came upon a dead tree, still upright, it was bone white, not a leaf or a scrap of bark on it. It stood dozens of feet tall, its skeptical branches clutching at the sky. We all stopped and stared for a minute, captivated by its presence. It was an odd totem of death to find in the middle of the lush green forest. Jimmy broke the silence. "Now that," he said, "will make a nice fort. Come on, let's push it over." Brian and I started forward, but Mike held back. "Guys, no," he said. "Leave it be." "What, it's perfect," said Jimmy, and Brian and I nodded our agreement. "Listen," said Mike, and we did. For a moment, all I heard was tree creaking silently as it swayed in the wind. And then quietly, there was a sound of someone sobbing. Distant, small, like they'd long given up all hope. Ooh.
The dog barked.
But then Jimmy said, she's so loud.
It kind of breaks it, doesn't it?
I know, right?
Sky! Oh, wow.
Oh, I bet you anything it's someone walking their dog. But then Jimmy said, "All I hear is a tree that sounds like it's ready to fall over. Come on, push!" And suiting Ashing the word, he put his hands against the tree and shoved. When he pushed, I heard it groan, and it sounded like no tree I'd ever heard. It was the sound of fatal sickness, of a man's dying breath. I'd been walking over to help him, but I stopped in my tracks when I heard that. "Stop!" cried Mike, but Jimmy just laughed and said, "Guys, come on, give me a hand here." "Stop it!" Mike said again, putting a hand on Jimmy's shoulder, but Jimmy pushed him away. Mike's face hardened. "I'm going home," he said. "If you're too stupid to listen, I ain't gonna stay here and watch you get hurt." "I'm heading back too," I said. Jimmy ignored me as Mike and I walked away. I heard him saying to Brian, "Give me a boost here. I think I could snap some of those limbs and we could use them for the corners." Mike and I walked in silence for a bit, listening to the leaves crunch under our feet. Finally he spoke. It's called the whimper tree, he said. My dad told me about it. It's bad luck. People die around it, especially anyone who's tried to hurt it. And it keeps them. Afterward, I mean, you heard it, right? The crying? I nodded and Mike continued. He said the whimper tree never lets you go and it feeds on stolen lives. So why not just avoid it? I asked. It seemed a reasonable question. We'd been pretty deep in the woods today. Or fence it off or something. Mike was already shaking his head before I finished talking. It's not like that. Not like a normal tree. It's anywhere. Anywhere it wants to be. It was deep in the forest today, but it could be right at the edge next time you see it. Or in a park even. It's always the same. Bone white, trunk split, big clawed branches looking years dead. And when it moves, you can hear the crying of people. It's collected. We walked on a long way without saying anything after that. Even the forest seemed oddly still and silent. When the town finally came into view again, it was a huge relief. Mike and I took off on our own homes without much of a goodbye to each other, eager to be back in the safety and security of our home. The next morning, we found out that Brian and Jimmy had never made it home at all. Granddad paused for a moment, fixing me with his one-eyed stare to make sure I was paying attention. I was utterly rapt. This sounded like another made-up story, but it was his best one yet. Mike and I took their fathers back out to where we'd been yesterday, thinking that maybe they'd gotten that fort built and decided to spend the night in it. When we got there, we found that they were still there. All right, both of them lying at the base of the whimper tree. Jimmy with a broken neck from a bad fall. A branch from the tree stabbed through his side. Brian underneath him. That same branch jammed directly into his throat, driven in by Jimmy's weight. Brian's dad wailed. I'll always remember that sound, that heart-wrenching noise of pain and loss. But underneath it, I heard another sound. As the wind blew and the branches of the whimper tree creaked, I could hear voices crying out in terror. They were whispers soft and sounded miles away, but I recognized them all the same. I knew it was Brian and Jimmy cut by the tree. Granddad was quiet, remembering. I piped up. But how'd you lose your eye? Granddad sighed. I was young, angry, and stupid. I thought I could get revenge. I went back a few days later, went out there on my own with a box of matches. I piled up leaves and sticks in the base of the whimper tree, built them up nice and high, then I set fire to it and stood back to watch the tree burn. There was a popping noise as a pine cone or wood knot exploded, and suddenly I felt heat on my face and a searing pain in my eye. I screamed, clawing at it, and I pulled an ember the size of my thumbnail out of my left eye. There was another pop, and another piece exploded from the fire, sticking me in the nose. I turned and ran, heedless of the fire I'd left behind. I fled all the way home in a panic, but it was far too late by the time I got there. My eye had been cooked into uselessness. I never saw out of it again. I was almost okay with that, though, because I'd killed that tree. The woods caught fire and a big swath burned. They had to get firefighters in from all over to put it out. People put two and two together with my burned eye in the woods, and I got in plenty of trouble for that one. But no one's property got burned, and everyone understood what I've been trying to do. Whoa. God, that blinded me! And everyone understood what I've been trying to do. At least a bit. So I never did see the judge about it. People mainly figured that I lost my eye was a punishment enough. I was pretty well locked down with house chores the rest of the summer, though. My folks weren't particularly inclined to let me have a lot of freedom after that. So it wasn't until school let back in that fall that I realized I hadn't won it all. It was the first week of school, the first Friday. I had already bored out of my being back, and I let my gaze drift out the window to the woods. Out behind the school, and there it was, big as life, the whimper tree. Standing rooted like it had always been there, its corpse-fingered branches pressing through other trees, standing not 10 feet from the forest edge. My heart froze, and I stared at it, unblinked until the teacher noticed and sharply called me back. I tore my eyes away, but as soon as her attention left me, I looked back to see as if it had been a mirage. It was still there, though, waiting. I got Mike to come outside with me later, and we stood in the back steps of the school and looked across the field to the trees. The whimper tree stood there, swaying slightly, and although the chatter of all the kids in school was much too loud to hear anything else, I knew that if I got closer, I would hear the muted cries. Just then, a hand fell on my shoulder, and I jumped about a foot in the air. The hand belonged to my dad, who I hadn't heard coming in. "Dad," he said, frowning, "are you telling the old story about the whimper tree again?" Granddad just smiled at him. "The fact that you still think it's just an old story makes my heart glad. That tree followed me until the day you left home. And it's out there waiting for me now," Dad finished for him. "Waiting to finish the job it had started." He smiled indulgently. "Believe what you like," said Granddad. I told the boy about it. You can make his own decision when he sees that tree." Dad shook his head. "That he can." I largely forgot about this story for several years. It was just one of the many my granddad had told me, and implausible as any other, so I followed it in the back of my mind. Until one day in 8th grade, when I was in the forest with my friend Jamie. We were wandering around, whacking trees with sticks and swinging on vines, when we came across this tremendous dead tree. It was ghostly grayish white, not a trace of bark on it, with branches like bone grasping at the sky. Suddenly my granddad's story crashed back on me and I halted in my tracks. "Whoa, cool tree," said Jamie. "Bet you I could climb to the top."
No.
I shook my head, feeling a sense of dread, but unable to formulate the sentence I wanted to say. "Sure I can," said Jamie, misinterpreting my head shake. "No, it's not a good idea," I said. "Why, you chicken?"
Yes.
taunted Jamie. He sauntered over the tree and started climbing, his feet kicking for a purchase on the smooth trunk. He shimmied his way to the lowest branch and grabbed on, swinging himself onto it. I held my breath as he swung, then released in a rush of air as he made it without mishap. "See, it's easy," said Jamie, straddling the limb. He reached out for a long, thin branch to keep himself upright, and he was halfway to his feet before, with a sharp snap, the branch broke free and Jamie tumbled to the ground. I raced over, terrified. But Jamie was already bounding to his feet, laughing. I'm fine. Were you worried about me?"
Yeah.
Little
Yes.
worrywart. He poked at me with the broken branch as he teased, jabbing at my stomach with each question. "Worry, baby," Jamie chanted, slicing at me with a stick. He whacked me on the arm, which stung from the impact.
Ow.
"Quit it," I said, snatching the stick with his grasp and whipping him on the arm in return. He lunged for me and we tussled for the stick, rolling around and grabbing for each other and tore it away from each other as we tried to tear it away from each other. With a crack, the stick broke between us, splintering in our hands. I felt a sharp pain as shards stabbed in my palm, and I cried out and broke free of the grapple. I rose to my feet, my bleeding right hand cradling in my left, and saw Jamie not only bleeding from his hand, but also from several pricks on his neck. "You okay?" he asked, our minor battle already forgotten. "Yeah," I said, squeezing my hand in an attempt to lessen the pain. "You?" He inspected his palm. "Yeah, it's fine. Mom's gonna want to pull those splinters out when I get home, though." He made a face which I mirrored. The idea of tweezers digging needles didn't appeal to either of us. I could see several of the slivers buried under my skin, though, and they were going to have to come out. There was more pain in my future. I was right about the needle and tweezers, but wrong when I thought it would end there. The next morning, my whole hand was red and swollen. It throbbed painfully whenever I moved it, and I could barely bend my fingers. My parents rushed me to the hospital, but it was already too late. The doctors did what they could, but my hand was going gangrenous at an impossibly rapid rate. In the end, they were forced to amputate. I learned later that Jamie was also admitted to the hospital that day. Unlike me, though, he didn't have shards just in his hand. He'd also gotten tiny fragments in his neck, and while I lost my hand, Jamie lost his life. I remember the day of Jamie's funeral, feeling the ache in my missing hand as I watched his coffin lowered to the ground. I remember the rage I felt at the unfairness of it all, and the desire to do something about it, to get back at that thing that had caused it.
No.
But my granddad was there, his big arm around my shoulders. I looked at his eye patch, thought about his attempt to kill the whimpering tree, and I chickened out. I told myself that it was a smart thing to do. Told myself that it was just a coincidence. Told myself 1,000 things to make it okay. But I knew deep down that the reason I hadn't gone back to chop that tree down was that I was afraid. I hated myself for that for years. Until today. I would have said that that day was the low point of my life. I lost my friend. I lost my good hand. I lost my belief that the world was a good and fair place. But I made my way back from there. I learned to be left-handed. I moved on with my life. I grew up and let things fade a bit. I graduated, moved out, got married, had kids of my own. And that's where we are right now, because my oldest son is 14, and he's on a camping trip with his class. He just texted me a group picture of all of them standing at the campsite smiling together, and directly behind him, bone-white trunk, stark against the surrounding trees, stands the whimper tree. Most of it is out of frame, but I know that trunk anywhere, and if that weren't enough, there's one branch visible in the picture too. It's not stretching out for the sky, it's pointing toward the camera. A threatening finger, and it's curved downward ever so slightly, reaching possessively for my son. I didn't see the text when it first arrived, I only noticed it an hour or so later. I've called his phone, but he's not answering, neither is his teacher. And the way I felt that day at Jamie's funeral was nothing compared to the pit in my stomach right now. I'm going to drive out there now. I'm bringing my axe. I doubt I can kill the tree, but I have to try. And I know it's miles away, but it seems to me that I can already hear the faint, faded screaming of my son's voice.
I never thought I'd be scared of a tree. That was a good story,
Isn't it?
That's a good story. That's creepy.
Yeah, I know. The whimpering tree.
I don't like it.
It makes it even more spooky because since, like, we're in a very forested part of Ohio.
Yeah. Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah, that's the whimpering tree.
Okay. Let's see. This one's called The Thing in the Window. Okay.
That took a while. Sorry.
You're fine. The Thing in the Window. Ready? Okay. That thing has been there for almost a week. The figure in the window. It looks featureless, only skin on a human frame, and it's pressing itself against the glass somehow. I don't know how it got there, and I don't know how to get rid of it. At first, I thought it was a prank, a doll or mannequin that some jerks put out there to scare me. But I realized, as I walked out of my house to pull it away, it wasn't there. I shrugged it off, thinking that someone had hidden it while I was walking through my door. But I went back in, and I looked out that same window, and it was looking in, staring at me. I walked around my house, yelling for whoever it was to come out, but no one was there. The thing is hairless and naked, and it didn't look like it actually had eyes, or even a face at all. But its head is turned towards me when I enter the room. When I sit on my computer, I can feel its faceless hatred boring into my neck. But when I turn around, it's innocently turned in a different direction. Finally, on Thursday, I tried to open the window, but it's stuck. I think its hands are keeping it down. But I got a good look at its face. Its eyes and mouth are behind the skin, pushing outward. It stared at me, smiling. And that smile just got wider and wider and wider until I thought its head would break in half. It raised its own hand and bashed the window with its palm. It was mocking me, but I saw the faintest crack begin to appear where it had hit, and I backed away. No way did I want that smile in the same room as me. So I got a roll of duct tape, and I started covering the window. I couldn't look directly at it. I nearly shit my pants just knowing it was watching me. But I couldn't help it. I took a quick glance at the skin-covered face. A small peek. It was angry. That grin was now a gaping frown full of teeth. The skin had ripped away from its mouth, and I could see down its cavernous throat. A menacing rumble started to fill the house, and that hairline crack began to spread like splintering ice. I pulled down the duct tape. The rumble stopped. The split skin healed over, and it began to smile again. Now, it's night, and the noise hasn't started again. There are no sounds, no rumble, no cracking glass. Everything is quiet now. I can feel its claws gripping the back of my chair. I can hear its skin stretching as it smiles. It's watching me tight.
Ew.
Isn't that just creepy?
Yeah.
That's nasty.
Okay, I found a story that is very similar to that one.
Okay.
I'm gonna read that one instead of the other one that I had planned. But when you... What was it? There's a part in that where it was like, right before it's like describing the face where it's like a face underneath like a layer of skin. Mm-hmm. When he's just looking at it, my first thought was, why don't you just give it a big old kiss? Is that why you're laughing? Yeah. I was like, I don't want to like interrupt you during your story just to say something. But yeah, that's why I was laughing, because I was like, yeah, give him a big old kiss.
I like that. Go ahead.
Okay, this one is also called The Thing, again by Creepypasta Stories. It is written by Anonymous, though. This one is a very short story, which is why I was like, maybe I won't read it, but
it's okay. I have one more short one.
Yeah. And then I can always go back to that other thing that I was going to show.
And we can always link these down below, too, if you want to read them.
If you want.
Again, alone, at night, in the dark. Anyway.
There were two young boys named Trevor and Will. They spent most of their summer vacation hanging around town looking for things to do. One hot August night, the boys were sitting on a fence by the main road. There was a cornfield just across the road. Suddenly, Trevor spotted something in the field, in the darkness. It was difficult to make out, but he thought it looked like some kind of weird animal. He nudged his friend and pointed in the direction of the strange-looking creature. Will said he could see it too. He wasn't sure, but the mysterious thing seemed vaguely human. The next thing they knew, the thing was gone. The boys craned their necks and scanned the field with their eyes. Out of the blackness came the thing. It slowly walked over to the edge of the field before disappearing again. Trevor and Will looked at each other, puzzled. "What was that?" asked Will. "I have no idea," replied Trevor. No sooner had he said that, Trevor felt a clammy hand on his shoulder. He turned around and found himself staring directly into the hideous face of the thing. He let out a yell of terror and surprise. The rotting skin on the thing's face was coming off in several places, revealing the bone underneath. For a moment, it just stared silently at Trevor with its dark, sunken eyes. Then it suddenly grabbed hold of his arm. Trevor felt its fingernails dig into his flesh as he wriggled out of its grasp. The two boys leapt out of the fence and ran down the road, screaming in horror. They didn't stop running until they reached their homes. They tried to tell their parents and friends about the thing they had seen that night, but nobody would believe them. When Trevor woke up the next morning, the scratches on his arm were still there. A few days later, they got worse. Trevor got sick, and his parents took him to see a doctor. After examining his arm, the doctor told the boy it was infected and gave him some pills to take. Unfortunately, Trevor's condition got worse and worse. The infection spread to his entire arm, and it wasn't long before his flesh was rotting and falling off. He was taken to the hospital, but no matter what the doctor did, no treatment seemed to work. The infection spread throughout his whole body. Trevor was confined to bed and started to waste away. It seemed like he was beyond help, and as the days went by, he steadily grew worse. His anguished parents could only sit at his bedside and cry as they watched their beloved son slowly rotting away before their eyes. On the day that Trevor finally passed away, Will came to the hospital to visit him. When the boy walked into the hospital room and saw Trevor lying in bed, he was horrified. His friend looked exactly like the thing.
This is nasty.
Nasty.
I don't like that. That was creepy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very scary, very spooky.
This one's more creepy. I feel like all of mine are just like
That's
creepy.
okay. I like the
eerie.
creepies.
Okay, this one's called The Perfect Girl. And we're not talking about you. Anyway.
Even though I know I'm not.
The Perfect Girl. Okay, The Perfect Girl. One summer, a girl moved into the house next door. She lived with her mother, and they were quite poor. Her father had abandoned them years before. She was new in town and found it hard to adjust. Although we both came from different backgrounds, she and I got to be friends. We were not very close friends, but I often visited her house and we would talk. The moment I laid eyes on her, I knew she was the perfect girl for me. Unfortunately, she didn't feel the same way. She was attracted to boys who were handsome and confident. It was clear that I wasn't her type.
Congratulations, that low self-esteem there.
I know. So I decided to wait. She didn't have any friends of her own to talk to, so she confided in me. Mostly she would complain about her life, telling me about how her mother hit her, how the girls in her class were mean and excluded her. She also told me about a boy she had a crush on. He was very popular with the girls in school. As she talked about her problems, I just sat there and listened. One day, the girl stopped coming to school. As it turned out, it was because she was being bullied. She told me that one of the popular girls in school had found out she had a crush on her boyfriend. The popular girl and her friends would bully her every time they saw her. She said they even spread vile rumors about her to her other classmates, and they were making her life a living nightmare. I just kept quiet and listened as she vented her problems. Her behavior began to change after she entered junior high school. She stayed out until all hours of the night and began to smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol.
Middle school?
I guess.
Okay.
I heard rumors that she was doing drugs, too. She fell in with a bad crowd and was even arrested by the police once. Her home life grew even worse, and she would frequently quarrel with her mother in the middle of the night. All of the girls in school hated her. Someone sprayed graffiti all over her house, calling her horrible names, saying disgusting things about her. Someone even killed her pet cat and stuffed it in her letterbox. Eventually, the girl dropped out of high school. She became withdrawn and locked herself in her bedroom. She stopped speaking to her mother and went for days without leaving her room. She rarely came out to even eat. She looked pale, sickly, and painfully thin. Her mother took...
It is a story about me. Sorry.
Oh, God.
Okay, that time I did interrupt you. Go on, though.
Her mother took to leaving food outside her door. She would only come out when she needed to use the bathroom or in the middle of the night when her mother was asleep. It was a miserable life. I went to see her for the first time in a long time. She refused to come out to see me, and even though I yelled through the keyhole, she refused to answer. Her mother gave me a bowl of soup to take upstairs to her. I caught a glimpse of her when she opened the door to take it. She was pale, drawn, haggard, and emaciated. She looked like a wet rag that had been wrung out. I went to see her every day. After a while, the girl began talking to me through the door. She told me how she was constantly fighting with her mother, and how all of her old friends had forgotten her. She told me how she had fallen in with a bad crowd and went out with them at night, stealing, doing drugs, getting into trouble. She told me she was caught shoplifting by the police, and she had a criminal record. She told me how her mother tried to help her at first, but when she wouldn't listen, her mother flew into a rage and beat her. Her life had become unbearable. She wanted to die, and she told me that she had tried to commit suicide many times by slitting her wrists. Just like the old days, she continued to talk on, and I just listened. Whenever she asked for my opinion, I just shrugged or made some innocuous remark. As time went by, the girl's mood gradually began to brighten. She even decided to come out of her room. It seemed like things were getting better, and the future was looking more positive. Her mother broke down in tears and thanked me profusely. One day, the girl went up to the roof of an apartment building in the neighborhood and jumped off. The building wasn't very high, and she landed in the shrubbery. That was probably what saved her life. However, her spinal cord was injured in the fall, and she was paralyzed from the neck down. The doctor said she would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. When she got out of the hospital, I went to see her. She was lying in her bed, unable to move. She apologized to me over and over, and she couldn't stop crying. She said she wished she didn't survive the fall and told me she was sorry for all the trouble she had caused me and her mother. I tried to soothe her and stop her from crying, but it's hard to comfort someone when they're lying down. I embraced her awkwardly. She was weeping so much that her whole body was shaking. She couldn't even wipe her own tears away. As I held her in my arms, I asked her to marry me.
No.
She said, "Really? Are you serious? Me? Really?" She couldn't believe that anyone would want her. I had to propose to her several times before she would really believe I meant it. She cried so hard her tears ran dry. I tried to reassure her and told her I wanted to marry her because I had always loved her, that she was the perfect girl for me. She always had been. Even when she ignored me and didn't return my feelings. Even when she was hanging with a bad crowd. Even when I had to listen to all her stupid problems. Even when she became so thin and was hiding in her room. Even when I told the popular girl she fancied her boyfriend. Even when I was spreading vile rumors about her to her classmates. Even when I sprayed graffiti all over her house. Even when I killed her cat and put it in the letterbox of her house. Even now that she was lying there in her bed, small, weak, and unable to move. Even now I still love her. You see, she is the perfect girl for me. Soon we will be married.
I hated that.
Isn't that creepy? I hate
it. You're like, oh, he's so nut. Well, like, when I first heard you, like, he was just being like that boy that would listen. It's like, no, there's like those creepy guys that will do that, and then they turn out to be like the worst people. Hated that. Hated it. Hated it.
What are you going to leave us with?
Alright, so there is this whole thing called an SCP for Secure, Contain, Protect Foundation, and it's basically like a real facility that captures anomalies to make sure that people, regular humans, are safe from them.
So us-ish.
So this is just going to be a description and then like a small like kind of monologue between two people. This is SCP-096. Object class, Euclid. Special containment procedures. SCP-096 is to be contained in its cell, a 5 meter by 5 by 5 airtight steel cube at all times. Weekly checks for any cracks or holes are mandatory. There is absolutely no video surveillance or optical tools of any kind inside of SCP-096's cell. Security personnel will use pre-installed pressure sensors and laser detectors to ensure the presence inside the cell. Any and all photos, videos, or recordings of SCP-096's likeliness are strictly forbidden without approval from Dr. And 05 it's blacked out.
Okay.
Description. SCP-096 is a humanoid creature measuring approximately 2.38 meters, which I looked it up, is
3 feet 3'7" inches.
Yes. I don't think that's right, but that's okay. In height, subject shows very little.
Wait,
You're right. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, 7.8. Sorry,
7.8 feet. Yeah.
I was going to say that wasn't right.
It's 7.8 feet in height. Septic shows very little muscle mass with preliminary analysis of body mass suggesting mild malnutrition. Arms are grossly out of proportion with the rest of the subject's body, with an approximate length of 1.5 meters each. So almost half of its body length.
Be like my arms being down in here.
Yeah, really. Skin is mostly devoid of pigment with no signs of any body hair. SCP-096's jaw can open to 4 times the normal of an average human. Other facial features remain similar to an average human with the exception of the eyes, which are also devoid of pigmentation. It is not yet known if the SCP is blind or not. It shows no signs of any higher brain function and is not considered to be sapient. SCP-096 is normally extremely docile with pressure sensors inside its cell indicating it spends most of the day pacing by the eastern wall. However, when someone views its face, whether it be directly via video recording or even a photograph, it will enter a stage of considerable emotional distress. SCP-096 will cover its face with its hands and begin screaming, crying, and babbling incoherently. Approximately 1 to 2 minutes after first viewing, SCP-096 will begin running to the person who viewed its face. Document speeds have varied from 35 kilometers per hour, which is about 20 miles per hour,
Ooh.
to devoid. It's blacked out and seems to depend on distance from from the viewer. At this point, no known material or method can impede SCP-096's progress. The actual position of the viewer does not seem to affect SCP-096's response. It seems to have innate sense of the viewer's location. Note, this reaction does not occur when viewing artistic depictions. Upon arriving at a viewer's location, SCP-096 will proceed to kill and data-expunged a viewer. 100% of cases have left no traces of a viewer, and SCP-096 will then sit down for several minutes before regaining its composure and becoming docile once again. It would then attempt to make its way back to its natural habitat. Data redacted. Due to the possibility of a mass chain reaction, including breach of Foundation security and large civilian loss of life, retrieval of subjects should be considered alpha priority. Dr. has also petitioned for immediate termination of SCP-096, and then crossed out order is waiting approval, and termination order has been approved and is carried out by the doctor on data redacted. And then this is the interview between a doctor and a captain. So, Captain, it always sucks ass to get initial retrieval duty. You have no idea what the damn thing is capable of besides what jacked up information the field technique scraped up, and you're lucky if they even tell you the whole story. They told us to bag and tag. Didn't tell us jack shit about looking at the damn thing. Doc,
could you describe the mission, please?
Yes, sorry. We have 2 choppers, one with my team, and one on backup with Zulu 9B and Dr. We spotted the target about 2 clicks north of our patrol path. I'm guessing he wasn't facing our direction, else he would have taken us out then and there.
Your report says SCP-096 didn't react to the cold. It was, I'm going to assume, a very low degree because it's blacked out.
It's 3 spaces too.
Yeah.
-0 degrees Celsius too, so even colder than Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was negative. And yes, it was butt naked and didn't so much as shiver. Anyway, we landed, approached the target, and Corporal got ready to bag it. That's when Dr. called. I turned to answer it, and that's what saved me. The target must have turned and my whole squad saw it.
That's when SCP-096 entered an agitated emotional state?
Yep. Interviewed. Now pause for a second before continuing. Sorry, got the willies for a second.
That's alright.
Yeah, well, I never saw its face. My squad did, and they paid for it up the ass.
Could you describe it a little more, please?
Yeah, it started screaming at us and crying. No animal roar, though. Sounded exactly like a person. Really fucking creepy. We started firing when it picked up Corporal and ripped off his leg. God, he was screaming for our help. Fucking A. Anyway, we were blowing chunks out of the target, round and round. Didn't do jack shit. I almost lost it when it started. Data had punched him.
That's when you ordered the use of and papers are heard moving. AT-4 HEDT launcher?
An anti-tank gun. Started carrying it ever since SCP got loose. I've seen those tear through tanks like tissue paper. Did the same thing to the target.
There was significant damage to SCP-096.
It didn't even fucking flinch. It kept tearing apart at my squad, but half of its torso gone. Drawing a circle across his torso.
But it was taking damage.
If it was, it didn't show it. It must have lost all its organs, all its blood, but it didn't acknowledge any of it. Its bone structure wasn't hurt at all, though. It kept tearing my squad apart.
So, no actual structural damage. How many rounds would you say were fired at SCP-096?
At least 1,000. Our door gunner kept his GAU-19 on it for at least 20 seconds. 20 fucking seconds. That's 600 rounds, 50 caliber rounds pumped into that thing. Might as well have been spitting at it.
This is when Zulu 9B arrived.
Yeah, and my squad was gone. Zulu 9B managed to get the bag over its head, and it just sat down. We got into the chopper and got it here. I don't know how I never saw its face. Maybe God or Buddha or whoever thought I should live. The jackass.
We have obtained an artist's depiction of SCP-096's face. Would you like to view it?
You know, after hearing that thing scream and the screams of my men, I don't think I want to put a face to what I heard. No. Just no.
All right. I believe we're done here. Thank you, Captain.
Joe's heard moving and footsteps leaving the room. Blank is confirmed to have left interview room.
Let this be on record that I am formally requesting SCP-096 to be terminated as soon as possible.
And log.
Oh, shoot. Well, on that creepy note, thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast. Maybe we'll do something like this again, or on Halloween, or whatever.
Halloween. Because that was fun. I like the scary stories.
That was fun, yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!